In 33 AD, a 33-year-old man destroyed the greatest financial scheme of all time and forever changed the way you view money, power, and spirituality. You're about to discover the most censored episode in Jesus' life, the one churches avoid discussing, the one religious leaders prefer to forget, and the one that could revolutionize your understanding of faith, justice, and courage. Why has this event been deliberately downplayed over the centuries? What explosive truths are hidden in this story? And most importantly, how does this change your life today? Get ready. The next minutes will shake your beliefs. But before we continue, if you're tired of superficial versions of faith, if you seek the truth behind the stories that changed the world, if you want to discover the secrets that few have the courage to reveal, then like this now, because it shows me that you're not just another passive spectator, but someone who is truly ready to have your convictions challenged. And subscribe to the channel by activating the bell, because you'll have exclusive access to content that unmasks the hidden truths of history. Those that books do untell, and that can revolutionize your understanding of spirituality and life. Because those who subscribe here aren't looking for entertainment, ... They're looking for real transformation. Now, ... Let's find out what really happened that day. Jerusalem, 30 AD, the greatest religious center in the known world. But something was rotten at the heart of the sacred. Imagine, you walk the marble steps of Solomon's temple. The air is heavy, not with incense, ... but with greed. What was supposed to be the house of God had become the greatest money laundering machine of antiquity. And there he was, Jesus of Nazareth, 30 years old, eyes ablaze. At that moment, something impossible was about to happen. One man alone against the entire most powerful financial religious system of his time. You think you know this story? Think again. What really happened that day was far more radical, far more dangerous, and far more current than you ever imagined. To understand the explosion, you need to know the bomb. The temple in Jerusalem was not just a place of prayer. It was the beating heart of the Jewish economy. Every Jewish man over 20, anywhere in the world, had to pay half a shekel per year to the temple. Half a shekel, does that seem small? Converting to today's values, we're talking about approximately $25 per person. Multiply that by the millions of Jews scattered throughout the Roman world. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into Jerusalem annually. But that was just the beginning. During the holidays, especially Passover, the financial flow increased tenfold. 3 million pilgrims arrived in the city. Each needed to buy sacrificial animals. Each needed to exchange their impure coins for temple coins. And who controlled this exchange rate? Who set the prices of the animals? The priestly family of Annas. Annas ben Seth, remember that name? High priest from 6 to 15 AD, but his real power lasted decades. 5 of his sons became high priests. His son-in-law Caiaphas held the position for 18 years. It was a dynasty, a religious mafia that controlled every coin that entered and left the temple. They weren't just spiritual leaders, they were the CEOs of the largest corporation in the ancient world. The system worked like this. You arrived in Jerusalem with your Roman, Greek, or provincial coins. But these coins were considered impure by the temple, because they bore images of emperors or pagan gods. So you were forced to exchange them for temple shekels. What was the exchange rate? Whatever they wanted. There was no regulation. There was no competition. It was an absolute monopoly. After the exchange, you had to buy animals for sacrifice. Doves, lambs, oxen. But you couldn't bring your own from home. Why? Because temple inspectors always found some defect in the animals brought in from outside. So you were forced to buy from authorized vendors. And these vendors? All licensed by Anna's family. The prices? Inflated by up to 1,000% of market value. Did you know Jesus was attacking the equivalent of Wall Street today? What happened there was the first major anti-establishment protest in history. But here's what's truly shocking. The profits didn't stop with the vendors. A percentage of each transaction went directly to the temple coffers. And who controlled these coffers? The Annas dynasty. They created the first franchise system in history. Licensed vendors controlled prices, a guaranteed monopoly. It was brilliant. It was diabolical. The numbers are astronomical. Historians estimate that the temple annually raised the equivalent of over 100 million current dollars. To give you an idea, the budget of the entire province of Judea was less than that. The temple was richer than the government. And where did all this happen? In the court of the Gentiles. The only place in the temple where non-Jews could enter to pray. The only space intended for the nations to approach God had become a noisy, chaotic, greedy marketplace. It was a double desecration, spiritual and social. Now you understand why Jesus was so outraged. It wasn't just corruption. It was a total perversion of the sacred purpose. The house that was supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations had become a den of robbers for a privileged family. But why now? Why this moment? The answer will shock you. Jesus didn't choose a random moment for his most radical action. He waited for the perfect timing, and that timing was calculated with military precision. It was Passover, the most important festival in Judaism. Jerusalem was packed with 3 million pilgrims. Political tension was at its peak. Pontius Pilate had arrived from Caesarea with extra troops to quell potential revolts. The zealots were active. The air was electric, but there was something else, something the evangelists don't clearly explain, but historians have discovered. This was the second purge. The first time, Jesus had done it at the beginning of his ministry, 3 years earlier. John 2:13-16 records this first purge. But now, 3 years later, the system had returned. Worse than before. Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't having a fit of rage. He was executing the most calculated and courageous plan of his life. This second purge was a declaration of war. It was the equivalent of walking into the New York Stock Exchange and turning over all the traders' tables, screaming that they were robbing the people. And Jesus knew perfectly well what the outcome would be. He was forcing a final confrontation. It was a masterful chess move. Either the religious authorities would surrender to his moral authority, or they would have to eliminate him. There was no middle ground. The symbolism of every action was purposeful. He didn't just attack any place. He attacked the court of the Gentiles. Why? Because this space represented God's dream for all humanity, a place where all nations could draw closer to the Creator. By desecrating this space, the authorities weren't just stealing money. They were stealing the hope of salvation from non-Jews. When Jesus overturned the money changers' tables, he was symbolically overturning the entire corrupt economic system. When he scattered the coins on the ground, he was showing what that ill-gotten wealth was truly worth: dust. When he released the doves, he was symbolically freeing all those trapped in that system of extortion. And there's more. The date was no coincidence. It was Monday of Passion Week. Jesus had triumphantly entered Jerusalem on Sunday. Now, the next day, he was demonstrating why he had come, not to establish a political kingdom, but to confront religious corruption. The timing was also strategic. It was morning, when commercial activity was at its peak. Maximum visibility, maximum impact. Everyone saw it. Everyone knew. There was no way to pretend it hadn't happened. And then, it happened. What you're about to see changed the course of history forever. Picture the scene. You're there, in the court of the Gentiles. The morning sun illuminates the marble columns. The air is heavy with the smell of animals, incense, and greed. Tables are everywhere. Money changers are counting coins. Vendors are shouting prices. Animals are bleating, mooing, and cooing. It's commercial chaos in the most sacred place on earth. And suddenly, the noise stops. Why? Because he has appeared. Jesus walks among the tables. His eyes sweep the entire scene. You can see the indignation rising. It's not uncontrolled anger. It's holy rage. It's the indignation of someone who sees his own home being violated. He approaches the first table. The money changer doesn't even look up, busy counting his profits. And then Jesus does the unthinkable. With a sudden, powerful movement, he overturns the table. Coins fly everywhere. The noise echoes through the columns. Everyone stops and stares, but he doesn't stop. Table after table, chair after chair. In a matter of minutes, the entire commercial system is on the ground, literally. And then he shouts, his voice echoing throughout the atrium. My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have turned it into a den of thieves. The word he used for thieves in Aramaic was lestai. It does unmean petty thieves, but violent thugs, highwaymen. He was calling the religious elite mafia, and he doesn't stop there. He takes ropes and makes a makeshift whip. Not to beat people, but to drive away animals. The symbolism is powerful. He is freeing both animals and people from the economic prison he has established there. The crowd is in absolute shock. Some run, others are paralyzed. But one thing is certain. Everyone knows they have just witnessed something that will change everything forever. And the authorities. Caiaphas was in the temple at that moment. He saw it all. His prophets scattered on the floor. His authority publicly challenged. His system destroyed by a carpenter from Nazareth. At that very moment, Jesus signed his death warrant. He knew it, and he did it anyway. Because what Jesus did was not just expel vendors, he was declaring war on an entire system. He was saying that the time had come to choose. Either you serve God or you serve money, but you cannot serve both. The reaction was instantaneous. The chief priests and the scribes met in emergency council. The question wasn't if they should eliminate him. The question was how to do it without causing a popular revolt. Mark 11:18 records, when the chief priests and the scribes heard this, they were looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him because all the people were astonished at his teaching. They feared him. Why? Because Jesus had exposed the truth they had hidden for decades. He had publicly shown that behind all that religious pomp lay pure greed. But the story didn't end there. What happened next was even more impressive. In the following days, something extraordinary happened. The temple became ... silent. For the first time in decades, the court of the Gentiles became what it should have been again, a place of prayer. People from all nations began to come to pray. The blind, the lame, the needy. Those who had previously been driven away by the commercial noise now found peace to draw near to God. Children began to play in the courts, singing Hosanna to the Son of David. It was a glimpse of what the temple should always have been. It was a small foretaste of the kingdom of God on earth. But the religious elite couldn't allow this. Not only because of the lost prophets, but because of the dangerous precedent set. If Jesus could challenge the temple system, what else could he question? Its authority, its legitimacy, its privileges. From that moment on, everything changed. Jesus had forced a crisis. Either he was right and the entire religious system was wrong, or he was a dangerous blasphemer who needed to be eliminated. And what about the Roman authorities? Pilate knew exactly what had happened. His spies reported everything. But, curiously, Rome didn't intervene. Why? Because Jesus hadn't attacked the government. He had attacked religious corruption. And this, from a Roman perspective, might even have been useful in keeping the Jewish leaders in check. But the impact went far beyond Jerusalem. The news spread like wildfire throughout Palestine. One man had challenged the most powerful system of his time. And he had won, at least temporarily. This act by Jesus influenced revolutions, reforms, and social justice movements for the next 2,000 years. Think about that. When Martin Luther preached his 95 Theses against the sale of indulgences, he was following Jesus' example in the temple. When Gandhi opposed the British salt monopoly, the same outrage echoed. When Martin Luther King Jr. marched for civil rights, he carried the same spirit. Cleansing the temple became the archetype of peaceful resistance against corrupt systems. Jesus showed that there are moments in life when you can no longer remain neutral. Moments when silence becomes complicity. But here's something no one explains to you about this story. Something modern churches prefer not to mention. Jesus wasn't just attacking their corruption. He was establishing an eternal principle. Whenever someone turns the sacred into a commodity, God opposes it. Whenever spirituality becomes a business, justice becomes a product. And faith becomes a commodity. The same spirit that moved Jesus that day rises in protest. And this disturbs you today because you see the same thing happening all around you. Politicians who use faith to win votes. Religious leaders who get rich selling blessings. Systems that promote material prosperity at the expense of spiritual integrity. The question Jesus asks throughout the centuries is always the same. Where is your holy indignation? Where is your courage to confront injustice? Where is your willingness to turn over the tables that need to be turned? But there is one thing no one has ever explained to you about this story. One truth that can completely change your perspective on faith, courage, and life's purpose. Jesus didn't drive out the money changers because they were selling things in the temple. He drove them out because they were selling people's own hope. Think about it. Those people arrived from far away after months of traveling, carrying their savings, their offerings, their hearts full of expectation. They came seeking forgiveness, hope, and encounter with God. And they found ... exploitation. It was the commodification of human, spiritual thirst. It was transforming people's desperation into an opportunity for profit. It was selling what God offers freely: love, forgiveness, hope. And that, my friend, was what truly enraged Jesus. It wasn't just a matter of money. It was a matter of humanity. Now, the million-dollar question. The question that will determine whether this video changed something in you or was just another entertainment. The question Jesus is asking you today: where in your life are you being complacent with systems that exploit people's hope? Where are you silently accepting injustices that should drive you crazy? What tables in your life need to be turned? What corrupt systems in your workplace, your community, your church, your family have you conveniently ignored? Jesus wasn't just cleaning a temple. He was showing how to live with absolute integrity. So what really happened that day in the temple? Jesus didn't just drive out vendors. He exposed a system. He challenged a structure. He confronted the corruption of the sacred, and he did it alone. But here's the truth that will haunt you. He knew IT would cost his life, and he did it anyway. Why does this story bother you so much? Because it forces you to look in the mirror and ask, where are you being complacent with corruption? What unjust systems do you silently accept? When was the last time you had the courage to stand up alone against what is wrong? Jesus wasn't just cleansing a temple. He was showing how to live with absolute integrity. The question isn't whether you agree with what he did. The question is, would you have the courage to do the same? Because as long as you're here on earth, as long as injustice exists around you, as long as corrupt systems thrive in your silence, the tables of the money changers still need to be turned. And maybe, just maybe, that person is you. Some moments change everything. This was one of them. The question is, what will you do with this truth? Will you file it away as just another interesting tidbit? Or will you let it transform the way you live? Because Jesus isn't asking you to change the whole world. He's asking you to have the courage to turn the tables within your reach, in your work, in your family, in your community, in your own life. The world doesn't need more spectators. It needs more people with the courage to say, this isn't right, and I will not remain silent. That's the true message of the temple. That's the legacy Jesus left, not an organized religion, not an institution, but an example of courage that echoes through the centuries, challenging each generation with the same question. When it was your turn to choose between comfort and courage, between convenience and conscience, between silence and truth, what did you choose? The peddler's table is still there. The question is, do you have the courage to turn it over? If this message touched your heart, if something in you was awakened, if you felt that holy restlessness that comes when truth knocks on the door of your conscience, leave your like now, but not as an automatic gesture. Leave it as a declaration that you will no longer accept living a life of complacency, that you choose courage over conformity. And subscribe to the channel by activating the bell, because you deserve to be part of a community that isn't afraid to ask the hard questions. A community that seeks truths that transform, not just information that entertains. Because whoever has made it this far, whoever has had the patience to listen to this entire story, whoever has allowed these words to penetrate their soul, that person deserves access to the deepest secrets of history and spirituality. In the next videos, we'll uncover other censored episodes, other explosive truths, other stories that can revolutionize your view of faith, courage, and purpose. But all of this is only for those who have the courage to go beyond the surface, for those who won't settle for less than the complete truth. You've proven today that you're one of those people. Now just make it official. Like, subscribe, bell, because the journey of transformation that began today, is just beginning. The table of the peddlers is still there, and together we'll have the courage to turn it over.